I came home to find my room empty. Mom tossed my clothes on the lawn and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." I nodded, grabbed my keys, and left without a word. 3 months later, he sent 29 messages saying, "Please come home." I, 23 M, pulled into the driveway after my shift at the warehouse, muscles aching from loading trucks for 9 hours straight. The porch light was off, which was unusual for 7 in the evening. Mom always kept it on. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and walked toward the front door, keys already in hand. That's when I saw them. My clothes, scattered across the lawn like someone had emptied my dresser from the second-floor window. My work uniforms, my sneakers, the jacket my grandmother gave me before she died. Everything just thrown out there, damp from the sprinklers that had run earlier. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Then the front door opened. Mom stepped out, arms crossed, her face hard in a way I'd never seen before. She told me I wasn't welcome here anymore. Just like that. No explanation, no lead-up, nothing. She said I needed to leave and not come back. I asked her what was happening, what I'd done. She just repeated herself, louder this time, saying I knew exactly what I'd done and she wouldn't have someone like me under her roof. Her voice carried across the yard, and I could see the neighbors' curtains moving. Mrs. Peterson was definitely watching. My younger brother appeared in the doorway behind her, looking down at his phone, completely indifferent to the scene unfolding. He didn't even glance up. My stepfather emerged next, standing behind Mom with his hand on her shoulder, nodding along like this was all perfectly reasonable. He'd been in my life since I was 8, and in that moment, I realized he'd been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. I asked again what I'd supposedly done. Mom's face twisted into something ugly, and she told me not to play dumb, that my brother had told her everything about what I'd been up to. She said she raised me better than this, that she was ashamed to call me her son. I looked at my brother then. He finally lifted his eyes from his phone and smirked. Actually smirked. That's when I understood. Whatever he'd told them, it was a lie, and he knew I knew it was a lie. But standing there on that lawn with my belongings scattered like trash, I realized the truth didn't matter. They'd already made their decision. I could have fought it, could have demanded to know exactly what I was being accused of, could have defended myself, could have made a scene. But something in me just shut down. I nodded, walked across the lawn, and started gathering my clothes. My hands moved mechanically, stuffing everything into garbage bags I pulled from my car. Mom went back inside. My brother followed. My stepfather stayed on the porch, watching to make sure I actually left. It took 3 trips to get everything into my beat-up sedan. The whole time, my mind was blank, like I was watching someone else go through this. When I finished, I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back at the house. Didn't cry. Didn't feel much of anything except a strange sense of numbness. I drove to a motel on the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and cigarette burns in the carpet. Paid for a week up front with money I'd been saving for a new transmission. That night, lying on a bed that smelled like industrial cleaner and old mistakes, I finally pulled out my phone to see what my brother had accused me of. Nothing. No messages. No missed calls. No explanation waiting for me anywhere. I texted my only friend from high school who still lived in town, asking if he'd heard anything about me. He responded an hour later saying my brother had been posting on social media about how I'd stolen money from Mom's purse multiple times and how I'd been dealing drugs out of the house. Neither thing was true. I'd never stolen anything in my life, and I barely drank, let alone dealt drugs. But it didn't matter. The story was out there now, and my family had chosen to believe it without even asking my side. I spent the next few days in a daze, going to work, coming back to the motel, staring at the water-stained ceiling. My supervisor noticed something was off and pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay at home. I told her I'd moved out, kept it vague. She nodded slowly and said if I needed extra shifts, just let her know. I took every extra shift she offered. Working 14-hour days meant less time to think, less time to feel the weight of what had happened. My paycheck started adding up. After 2 weeks, I moved out of the motel and into a room I rented from an older couple who needed help with their mortgage. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, but it was mine. They didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just gave me a key and showed me where the bathroom was. A month passed, then 2. I kept my head down, worked overtime whenever possible, and slowly started building something resembling a life. The couple I rented from, An elderly pair who'd lost their son in a car accident years ago treated me with more kindness than my own family had shown me in years. The wife started leaving plates of food outside my door. The husband taught me how to fix the plumbing when the sink backed up. They never pried, but somehow they understood. During my lunch breaks at work, I started researching. I wanted to understand what my brother had done, why he'd done it. I went through his social media posts, read every comment, pieced together the timeline. He'd started his campaign against me weeks before I was kicked out, laying groundwork, planting seeds of doubt. He'd told people I'd been acting strange, staying out late, being secretive. All lies, but presented in a way that seemed concerned, worried even. By the time he dropped the accusations about theft and drugs, people were primed to believe him. The question was why. We'd never been close, but I'd never thought he hated me. Then I found it, buried in a conversation he'd had with one of his friends in a semi-public Discord server. He'd been bragging about getting my room once I was gone. My room, which was bigger and had the better window and the closet that actually fit clothes. That's what this was about. He'd destroyed my relationship with our mother, gotten me thrown out of my home, ruined my reputation in our small town, all because he wanted a bigger bedroom. I sat in my car in the warehouse parking lot, reading those messages over and over, waiting to feel something. Anger, maybe. Betrayal. But all I felt was a cold clarity. I screenshotted everything, saved it all to 3 different places, and then I went back to work. By month 3, I'd saved enough to put down a deposit on an actual apartment. Nothing fancy, but it had a kitchen and a bathroom that didn't require sharing, and the locks worked properly. I bought furniture from thrift stores, piece by piece. A couch that sagged in the middle but was comfortable enough. A table someone had painted bright blue that I kind of liked. I was building something, slowly, without anyone's help. That's when the messages started. The first one came from Mom's number on a Tuesday afternoon. She asked where I was, said they needed to talk. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. 2 days later, another one. This time asking why I wasn't responding, saying she was worried. I deleted that one too. Then my stepfather started. Short messages at first, saying I should call Mom, that she missed me. Then longer ones, explaining that my brother had admitted he might have exaggerated some things. Might have. Exaggerated. Like he'd slightly embellished a story instead of fabricating lies that got me thrown out of my home. I didn't respond to any of them. I went to work, came home to my small apartment, ate dinner with the elderly couple downstairs once a week, and lived my life. Each message that came through got deleted without a full read. I could see the preview text, see them getting more desperate, but I didn't open them. By the end of month 3, my stepfather had sent 29 messages. I counted. 29 attempts to get me to come home, each one more insistent than the last. The latest ones talked about how my brother felt terrible, how Mom was struggling, how the family needed to heal, how they all missed me and wanted me back. Not once did anyone say they were sorry. Not once did anyone admit they'd been wrong to throw me out without even listening to my side. Not once did anyone acknowledge that they'd chosen to believe lies about me, their own son and brother, without a second thought. I was sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading through apartment listings for better places, when my phone rang. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message, her voice thick with tears, begging me to come home for Sunday dinner, saying we could work everything out as a family. She said my brother wanted to apologize in person, that it would mean so much to everyone if I'd just give them a chance. I listened to the voicemail twice, then deleted it. That afternoon, I drove to a storage facility across town and rented a small unit. Then I went back to my apartment and gathered everything I'd screenshotted, every post my brother had made, every lie he'd told, every piece of evidence showing exactly what he'd done and why. I printed it all out at the library, organized it chronologically, and put it in a folder. Then I made copies. 3 sets total. 1 went in the storage unit. 1 went in a safe deposit box I opened at a bank. 1 stayed with me. Sunday came and went. More messages arrived, these ones angry now. My stepfather accused me of being selfish, of punishing the family, of refusing to be the bigger person. He said my mother was having health problems from the stress, that I needed to stop being childish and come home. That made me laugh. Actually laugh out loud in my empty apartment. I was childish for not rushing back to people who'd thrown me out like garbage. I was selfish for not accepting half-hearted excuses and demands that I make everything better. They'd kicked me out 3 months ago without a conversation, And now I was the problem for not immediately forgiving them? Another week passed. The messages slowed down but didn't stop. My brother tried reaching out directly for the first time, a long rambling text about how he'd made mistakes and hoped we could move past this. He said he'd been going through some stuff and hadn't handled it well. Still no actual apology. Still no admission of what he'd really done. I was working a late shift when my supervisor called me into her office. I thought maybe I was in trouble, but she gestured for me to sit and asked how I'd feel about a promotion. The assistant manager position had opened up, and she'd been impressed with my work ethic and reliability. It came with a significant raise and health benefits. I accepted on the spot. She smiled and shook my hand, saying she'd known I was management material since day one. I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in months: pride. Actual, genuine pride in myself. That night, I texted the elderly couple I'd been renting from and asked if they'd be my references for a better apartment I'd found. They both responded immediately saying yes, and the wife added that I was like a grandson to them. I sat on my sagging couch reading that message over and over, realizing these people who'd known me for less than 3 months cared more about me than my own family had. Update 1. 4 months after being kicked out, I moved into a proper one-bedroom apartment in a better part of town. The elderly couple helped me move, and the husband slipped me $100, saying every young man needed a little extra when starting fresh. I tried to refuse, but he insisted, and his wife hugged me tight, making me promise to visit every Sunday for dinner. The messages from my family had mostly stopped. Occasionally my stepfather would send something, but they'd lost the desperate edge. I think they'd finally accepted I wasn't coming back on their terms. I settled into my new place, bought some actual furniture that wasn't from thrift stores, and started living. Really living, not just surviving. I picked up a hobby I'd always wanted to try: woodworking. Found a community center that offered classes and started going twice a week. Made some friends there, people who knew nothing about my past and didn't care. They just knew me as the quiet guy who was pretty good with a chisel. 6 months in, I got a letter, actually mailed to my new address, which meant someone had worked to find me. It was from Mom. 3 pages of handwritten text talking about how much she missed me, how empty the house felt, how she regretted everything. She said my brother had confessed to lying about everything, that he'd broken down crying and admitted he'd made it all up because he wanted my room. She said she should have believed me, should have asked questions, should have been a better mother. She ended the letter asking me to meet her for coffee, just the 2 of us, so she could apologize properly and try to make things right. I read that letter sitting at my kitchen table, and for the first time since that night on the lawn, I felt something crack in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. Maybe the beginning of it. Or maybe just the acknowledgement that what had happened actually hurt, that I'd been burying it under work and busy schedules and new friendships. I put the letter in a drawer and didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely didn't know what I wanted. Did I want my family back? Did I want to hear apologies? Did I even care anymore? 2 weeks later, I was at Sunday dinner with the elderly couple when the wife asked if I had any family in the area. I'd always kept my answers vague, but something about the way she asked, gentle and without judgment, made me tell her everything. The whole story spilled out. The lies, the accusations, being thrown out, the months of silence, and now the letters and messages asking me to come back. They both listened without interrupting. When I finished, the husband leaned back in his chair and asked me a simple question: what did I want? I realized I didn't know. I'd been so focused on surviving, then on building a new life, that I hadn't stopped to figure out what I actually wanted from any of this. The wife reached across the table and patted my hand. She said whatever I decided, it should be for me, not for them. That forgiveness was fine, but only if it came from a genuine place, not from obligation or guilt. That I didn't owe anyone access to the life I'd built. That night, I pulled out the folder of evidence I'd compiled. All of my brother's posts, all his lies, the screenshots of him bragging about getting my room. I looked through it all, really looked at it, and tried to figure out what I wanted to do with it. 7 months after being kicked out, I made a decision. I drove to the coffee shop Mom had mentioned in her letter, the one we used to go to when I was in high school. I texted her from the parking lot asking if she still wanted to meet. She responded in seconds saying yes, asking when. I told her I was outside. She arrived 10 minutes later, and I barely recognized her. She looked older, tired, like she'd aged years and months. We sat across from each other in a corner booth, and she started crying before the waitress even brought our coffee. She apologized over and over, saying she'd been a terrible mother, that she'd failed me, that she'd let her husband and younger son poison her against me without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. I let her talk, didn't interrupt, didn't offer comfort, just listened. When she finally stopped, I asked her one question: why did she believe them? She didn't have a good answer. Said she didn't know, that she'd been stressed about money, about her marriage, about 100 other things, and when my brother came to her with his accusations, some part of her had just snapped. She said it wasn't an excuse, but it was the truth. I asked if she'd believed I was capable of stealing from her and dealing drugs. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Some part of her had believed it, or had wanted to believe it, because it was easier than confronting whatever was really wrong in her life. I pulled out my phone and showed her everything. Every screenshot, every post, every piece of evidence of what my brother had done. She stared at the screen, her face going pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. She kept whispering that she was sorry, that she didn't know, but we both knew that wasn't quite true. She'd chosen not to know. She'd chosen the easy narrative over her own son. When she finished looking through everything, I put my phone away and told her I'd think about whether I wanted her in my life. That I appreciated the apology, but apologies didn't undo what happened. They didn't give me back the months of rebuilding myself from nothing. They didn't erase the humiliation of having my clothes thrown on the lawn while the neighbors watched. She asked what she could do to make it right. I told her there wasn't anything. That some things couldn't be fixed, only lived with. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee that had gone cold. Finally, she asked if she could hug me. I said no. It wasn't out of cruelty, but because I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. I left the coffee shop and drove home to my apartment. That night, I made a list of everyone who'd stood by me after I was kicked out. The elderly couple who took me in. My supervisor who gave me extra shifts and eventually a promotion. The guys from my woodworking class who'd become genuine friends. It was a short list, but every name on it mattered more than my entire family ever had. Update 2. 8 months after everything fell apart, my brother showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he found my address, but there he was, standing in the hallway outside my door when I came home from work. He looked awful. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping. He asked if we could talk. I almost said no, almost shut the door in his face, but something made me step aside and let him in. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking around at the life I'd built without any of them. The furniture I'd bought, the woodworking projects on my shelf, the photos of me and my new friends. He tried to apologize, stumbling over words, saying he'd ruined everything and didn't know how to fix it. He said Mom was a mess, that she barely left her room anymore, that my stepfather had started drinking more, that the house felt empty and wrong. I asked him why he did it, why he made up those lies, why he destroyed my life for a bigger bedroom. He broke down then, actually crying, saying he didn't know, that he'd been jealous of me, of how Mom used to look at me differently, like I was special somehow, because I wasn't my stepfather's biological son. He said he wanted to be the favorite for once, wanted to be the one she chose. It was such a stupid, childish reason that I almost laughed. He'd blown up my entire life because he was jealous of imagined favoritism. He'd made me homeless, ruined my reputation, turned our mother against me, all because he wanted to feel special. I told him to leave. He begged me to listen, to give him a chance to make it right, but I'd heard enough. I opened the door and waited until he walked through it. Before he left, he turned back and asked if I'd ever forgive him. I said I didn't know, but probably not. Some things couldn't be forgiven, only survived. After he left, I called the elderly couple. The wife answered, and I told her what had happened. She listened quietly, then invited me over for tea. I spent the evening with them, sitting in their warm kitchen, listening to the husband's stories about his son, about regret and forgiveness, and moving forward. He said forgiveness wasn't about letting people back into your life. It was about not letting them poison the life you'd built. That I could forgive my family and still choose to keep my distance. That night, lying in bed in my quiet apartment, I realized I'd already made my choice. I'd made it the moment I drove away from that house with my belongings in garbage bags. I'd chosen myself, chosen survival, chosen to build something new rather than fight for a place in a family that didn't want me. 9 months in, I got promoted again. assistant manager to manager, overseeing an entire shift at the warehouse. The raise meant I could finally start saving seriously, maybe even think about buying a house someday. My supervisor, now my equal in management, took me out for drinks to celebrate. She told me she was proud of me, that watching me rebuild my life had been inspiring. That same week, I went to Sunday dinner with the elderly couple and told them I'd decided to change my last name. Not to something completely new, but to my grandmother's maiden name. The grandmother who died when I was 16, who'd been the only person in my family who ever really saw me. They both got teary-eyed, and the wife said my grandmother would be proud of the man I'd become. The paperwork took a few weeks, but when it was done, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd shed the last connection to people who'd never valued me. I was someone new now, someone I'd built from scratch. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real-life-based stories. Thanks in advance.